Welcome, everybody. So we're not going to redo that, but today we're going to be talking about the dream of the profession of two-year college English, which some folks don't think there is one. Some folks think there is one. I would say that it's incomplete and uneven because of a lot of different conditions, and we'll talk about that. So I want to talk just a little bit about our literacy, who we are, and then I want to talk about an argument from the pages of TETYC that I think really frames the last decade and lays out the work ahead of us. And then I hope to take about 30 minutes, which is a long time. We all know that lecturing at people is not terrific pedagogy. And then after that, I'm hoping that we're able to have a conversation. You'll be able to, folks on Zoom, you'll be able to jump in, and Aaron will kind of moderate that. And then Al will herd the cats here in Oklahoma City. So, okay, my assumption is that we are literacy professionals. I don't think that we don't just do writing studies. In fact, I would say we do even more than literacy, but we'll get to that in a moment. So when I say literacy professionals, I mean the reading and writing tasks that happen in post-secondary education. And as we have developmental education, community colleges teach most of that, what's left of it. I would say reading, what's left of it because of educational mandates, lots of really poor understandings of developmental education, that has been really reduced. And so we now, English departments especially, are the folks who do the whole range of literacy instruction at community colleges. And we might have co-requisite programs, and but what's happening is that what we're teaching in Composition 1 now looks a lot like what we might have been teaching in Dev Ed years ago. And I've been at this since I've been a full-time faculty member since 2009. And so I feel like I've lived that experience. And so we do a lot of literacy instruction, we do a lot of writing instruction, but we do a lot of other things too, where we engage with teaching students how to be students and thinking about student success. And then of course we do the work that or some of us, or many of us, I assume that many of us do the work that we are preparing students as citizens, as future members of our communities. I think that that is vital too. But that sounds, of course, very different than what you might hear from other spaces. And what you might hear from other spaces is that we are doing lots of workforce preparation. And if you've been following, let's say from Bill Clinton forward, right? So Clinton, G.W. Bush, Obama, and then President Trump, you have this arc of folks really putting community colleges into that vocational space and talking about them for job preparation. And in fact, with the last president, he even went so far as to say, I don't know what we mean by community, and really taking community out and just really dropping that whole idea. And in the pages of TETYC, this has been a conversation because it's about who we are and what we do as literacy professionals. And this is the struggle that we have. And I want to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to share my screen, which I know you've all gotten used to hearing in our Zoom world. So this is an article from a guy named Keith Kroll. He's up in Michigan, and Keith has been writing in two-year college spaces for a long time. He co-edited a book called The Politics of Two-Year College Writing with Barry Alford. And Keith is an important voice in two-year college studies. And this is now a dozen, or it's 10 years, 11 years old. And he starts with this from from Trum Simmons. After 40 years has the grand experiment failed, and he means community colleges, right? And right here, the grand experiment of the community college is that of democracy's colleges coming to an end. And with that ending comes the end of community college's academic function, that is to provide an education, and concomitantly the community college English profession. So this is important and in part wrong. So the grand experiment of the community colleges, democracy's college, didn't even happen until after World War II with the Truman Commission. When community colleges began in the early 1900s, we were already having the conversation from the very get-go about two missions, a dual mission for community colleges or technical colleges or junior colleges. And there was always this job training mission, and then there was an academic mission. And there were even college presidents, the presidents of Columbia or Chicago, University of Chicago and Stanford, who wanted to cede the first 2 years of undergraduate education to community colleges because they thought that it was really kind of beneath them and would let them pursue their research mission. So one of the problems that we have when we think about community college work like this is we have nostalgia. And so we're looking back on things with rose-colored glasses. And so to say that there was the idea of democracy's college is true, right? But it's also true at the same time at the first place that I taught that it was originally Metro Tech, and that teachers were doing English teachers were doing drill and skill classes in the 70s in a former factory, and that the classrooms were divided by curtains, huge curtains that you had to roll back, right, that were leftovers from the faculty floor. And so that, so English had to professionalize itself in the junior college. And it became disciplinary as time went on. The same is very true at the institution that I'm at now. There was a long time where folks were really deeply underpaid, and as Salt Lake Community College, went to a tenure system and went to a department system, there was a different revaluation of their work. That doesn't happen everywhere, but I want to be clear that this idea that it was ever democracy's college has always been aspirational and contested. And then the idea that we have the community college's academic function to provide an education, it's interesting because that's disciplinary, right? So when we talk about, and you can see here where I'm talking about the definitions have problems. So a discipline is the set of the knowledge, the body of knowledge that we use in our classrooms, right? You earned that you earned that in a lot of places, but you earned it in graduate school and you earned it in professional development. You get it in classes like this. A profession is the set of practices and organizations that allow us to organize our work. So you have two different things, a discipline and a profession. And maybe Kroll here, I mean, I know Keith, and he might watch this and send me a long email, and that's okay. But maybe what we mean here is that without the profession, there can be no discipline. And maybe that's true, but I want to make sure that we kind of complicate that a little bit. But let's go further with Kroll. And, I've got a bunch of faces that are in the way here. Can we make the faces go somewhere? Oh, look at that. They went down to the bottom. All right. So I want to come down here, and he says that you'll love this. And so now imagine this is again a decade ago, and I want you to think to yourself, is he right or is he wrong? And this is a question to have. Kroll writes, my prediction is that within the next 20 years at community colleges, around 90% of the faculty will be part-time, and many will be teaching solely online. Well, after the pandemic, I mean, we were already at 85% contingency, right? There's decent data on that. Now, that doesn't mean that 85% of classes are taught by contingent faculty, but it does mean that 85% of the total number. So he's not wrong. And because of the pandemic, many of us are online and will stay online. And is that good news or bad news, right? I mean, this is a question to have. What do we think of online education? But let's go a little bit further. In the community college of the future, each department will have one full-time faculty manager whose responsibilities will include distributing prepackaged, business-driven curricula and course syllabi, selecting the common textbook from which all faculty will teach, scheduling and assigning classes in an overwhelming percentage, 80% or more, will be taught online, and managing the online grading program. And we were talking about this in our in-person sessions yesterday, how learning management systems and administrative intrusion into learning management systems ends up kind of really harming research best practices in pedagogy. So I don't know if he's right here. He's not exactly right, but he's not exactly wrong. But let's go just a little bit further. And Donnie and I were figuring out this morning how to make different colors. I hope you're all happy with my lavender here. There will no longer be in-person department meetings, faculty representation on college committees, shared governance, and professional development, because the part-time faculty member will be able to live in Minnesota and teach online in Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois as community college teacher. He's saying all that's going. And then he says, at this point, the de-skilling of the faculty will be complete. They will no longer be teachers, but technicians with no say in what they teach and how they teach. My college isn't there. And I think he's talking about getting rid of the discipline or using a kind of functionalist view of the discipline and destroying the profession. I don't know that he's right or wrong, but I can say that right now, the TYCA National Survey, one of our projects is we had to go to all 1,100 community colleges' websites. And we divided this up between like 20 people because there was no way I was going to do it. And they started visiting about 60 websites each. And they started writing back, not to each other, just to me. And what they were finding is that English departments were gone. You can't find them on web pages. And when you have schools that have pathways, the English department is even more likely to be gone. And so pathways, which the data does not show as working any better, right? There's the national data that's coming out is that all of this money has been spent and that it hasn't worked all that much better. But that the pathways have done one thing, and they've erased disciplinarity. They've erased our presence on many of these websites, not everywhere. You can go to Austin Community College, and there's a robust website with faculty members. You can go to my college, Salt Lake Community College, where we have our CVs up, we have e-faculty portfolios, we have all of those kinds of things. They're there. But this is not as radical a notion as we think it is. One of the things that just happened at my college is that we determined that our online instructors had to live in the state of Utah, not because of disciplinary or professional reasons, but because of human resources reasons. And so it's very interesting how this might work out. So Keith is making this big claim. I think I have just a little bit more from Keith. Come on, down where it was. All right. No, maybe that was the end of it. In other words, so then Keith says, what do we have to do? And this is really where we want to get to in this talk. Keith says, it's no longer possible simply to close the door of our classroom or have any chance to continue to be a profession, right? A group of people who are able to govern ourselves in some way and to chart our own course. We must push back, resist, become public intellectuals. Well, that's great. So let's talk about that. So Jeff Andalora, who was the TYCA National Chair, wrote some of our most important articles about the history of the community college. And as the TYCA National Chair, he was really the driving force behind starting our national conference, which I hope you will all come to in February in Chicago. We had to do that because we canceled in Chicago last year because of the pandemic. It was the only week we could reschedule. But come enjoy warm Chicago in February. But Andalora hated, I think is really a way to say this, Kroll's article, and this is one of the rare instances you get in scholarly journals where you have somebody come back and have a conversation. So in writing studies, the famous is the Bartholomew elbow kind of debate. But this is, I think, another debate that really sets up the moment that we're in, that we've been in and continue to be in, and that I want to then talk about after this, kind of dreaming our profession. And so Andalura concedes some of Kroll's points, but he says the problem I see is that in all of this is that while local control may be defensible, right, we should have control over our curriculum in our departments. A house in disarray is not. And this is a really important thing. And as I talk to folks, one of the things that at the 3 different English departments I've worked at, one of the best parts about English departments is that they have robust debates about what they should teach. One of the worst things about English departments is that they've been having that robust debate since 1972, and there are at least 3 people who were mad and aren't ever going to change. And these debates don't really, they haven't moved us forward. We haven't made a decision on what we teach and how we teach and how we're going to articulate it, even though there's research that supports some very good research-based best practices, even though we as expert practitioners have some good ideas about what it takes to do that work. Yet we have folks who really, really like to hold on to some assignments or some ways of doing things. And we have fossilization, right? And we have legitimate curricular disagreements, but the problem is that we spend a lot of time disagreeing with ourselves, and we haven't done a very good job of creating this curricular and disciplinary solidarity so that we can then have professional momentum to manage up at our institutions and manage up nationally. And so Jeff's not wrong either. And so academic freedom is not defensible when it is academic irresponsibility, right? So Jeff says that it is faculty by not relentlessly championing a model of shared governance and taking an activist role in all matters of our profession. It is that faculty by not relentlessly championing a model of shared governance and taking an activist role in all that matters of our profession might allow these corporate values to impact our academic function. So he's saying, we can complain about these business models, and we should, about neoliberalism, and we should, but we also have to think about what we can do is shared governance as disciplinary cohesion, I would say. And he says the threat from outside forces, neoliberal or otherwise, is greatly diminished by a mobilized activist faculty. And here we are this morning. You are the mobilized activist faculty. By default, right? There are 33,000 community colleges, there are 33,000 community college English teachers, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There are over 300 community colleges in the Southwest region. Not all of them are represented here, not 10% of them, right? So we have this issue, and we're just working on this. We have this issue where we need to think about what it is we have to do. And let me stop my share here. One of the things that I would talk about is what is the value of TYCA as a professional organization? And the regionals can be a place where local conditions are met and addressed and adapted to. And they can do that better than just about anything else, right? And I fret, very honestly, I fret for the future of the regions. There were 80 some people at TYCA Midwest last week. We have probably a total of 40 or 50 here at TYCA Southwest this week. And it goes on, right? And some of that's funding, some of that's a lot of things. But at the same time, what is our professional commitment? How do we put our own house in order? Because at dinner last night or in the sessions yesterday, we got to hear about the kinds of anti-intellectual and anti-education practices that drive college boards. Not all of them, but some of them, and maybe not the whole board, maybe just a member. And also that we have college presidents who don't understand the academic function And we have to find ways to become cohesive as a discipline and talk that function up, manage it up, socialize it up. So I want to suggest just two things today. So first is that, well, three things. Everybody should apply or should subscribe to the journal, because that is it's not just that I edit it, although boy, it's really fancy and good, but it's that we have one of the 8 NCTE peer-reviewed journals. And in many ways, I think we have the best of the NCTE peer-reviewed journals because it is the site where we discuss how theory and practice work together to serve our students, to build, to advance disciplinary knowledge, and to build our profession. And it is the site that does that. The journal does that. And there are some really good folks writing in that. And I would love more folks writing in that. We are the only journal that represents all regions in our editorial board. So we have every TYCA region represented on the editorial board. So it isn't just, the best scholars in the field, it's taking local conditions into account. So the journal is one way for us to build that disciplinary knowledge, to build and share professional knowledge. The TYCA National Organization is another site that we want to think about because there are white papers. There are, we've done everything from workload studies, workforce studies, white papers on education, developmental education, to several reports over the last 30 years on how to prepare English professors to work in the 2-year college. But then to think disciplinarily and departmentally for a moment, one of the things that I don't think that we do very well and that we often resist because it feels corporate-y is that we don't account for what we do in our departments. And Joanne Baird-Giordano and I were talking about this. And, if you think about it, there are things that an English department does that nobody else can do at a college. We do writing placement. We do the writing center, and we probably have a lot to do with the reading center. And if you'll look frequently, English faculty have a larger role in shared governance than other departments because we're really good communicators. That is, we would love to have an argument with you and write an email about it, a long, detailed email that has no logical fallacies that you should really not. Yeah. So we do that. But what we don't do is we don't do a good job of explaining the work that we do even at our college. And so I would offer something from corporate America. I would offer the concept of capacity modeling. And capacity modeling is something from project management where corporations look at these huge projects that they're going to do and they allocate resources. How many resources do they need? How much time does it take? It's fascinating, and I invite you to all look it up. And I'm certain that you'll think I'm a little crazy. But at the department level, have we done a real accounting of what we do, how long it takes us to do it, and how many people are involved? And sometimes we don't want to do this because, again, we have stagnant faculty who just teach and don't do anything else, and we allow that, right? We don't hold our own departments accountable. We don't have those conversations. But I wonder if we took our 5-5 load as being 100% effort, and then we thought of the fact that we are on 3 committees, and suddenly we're at 110%, and we're also on a national committee. And so I wonder what our effort is, how our capacity is being used. And one of the things that's emerged from the pandemic is that we talk about burnout all the time. Everybody's tired and everybody's burned out. And I would heartily reject that. You're not burned out, you've been exploited. And so burnout is one of those things that makes it sound like it's an individual's fault, and it's just not so. It's the system that we've set up that does not account for how we make our labor visible to other people. And so what is your capacity, a legitimate capacity? And honestly, if you think about it, this would be my argument. A 4-4 is a full load. A 5-5 is already at overload. And if you're in Georgia, heaven forgive, it's 6-6. And I know that there are other states that are going to that. So we're being asked to do more through that kind of logic of production, right? Of logic of efficiency. But what we're not doing is we're not accounting for how many hours these things take. And we're not building a capacity model. And it's one of those things, the human resources people at your college already know what capacity models are. They went to school and they learned it. And if you go and you find someone and you do this capacity modeling exercise, it will be interesting to see what all of you are doing at your colleges and what your department does. And I think that you'll find, my assessment, my guess is that you will find that English departments have an outsized role that isn't really rewarded. And if you've lost full-time lines and yet you're over capacity, this is the place where you can start to make an argument for retaining those full-time lines. And it is because because frequently research-based best practice models don't work. We have SCADs, we have tons of research on how big our classes should be and what kinds of writing assignments we should have. And that isn't necessarily what those folks are interested in. And I mean, hopefully you're summarizing those kinds of things into bullet points for folks and slipping the PDFs under their door and writing them emails endlessly, right? Because you have to advocate and you have to socialize up. But also, if we know our audience, which is what allegedly English teachers do, right? We teach audience, and we think of the genre that they work in, which is that genre of kind of business logics, then why don't we take that on and see just exactly what we're doing in their world? And I think that we would find that it's an enormous amount, that we do a great deal, right? And I don't mean that as like English departments are the coolest and the best, although let's be honest, they frequently are the best. Come on, really? No. But I do. I love my English people. But one of the things that we haven't done is this idea there. So to come back, and I know that I've probably gone on too long and we want to have this conversation. If we are to put our house into order and to preserve a future profession, we have to do that departmentally, and then at the college, at the TYCA regionals, and nationally. And this 40 people here this year needs to be 100 people next year. And it doesn't matter if you're here on Zoom or in person. In person's great, and Zoom's great because we all have our things, but you all have to bring 2 friends. And we have to make sure our libraries have a subscription to the journal, that our department has a subscription to the journal, that your president has a subscription to the journal, right? Get him a subscription, her, 30% are women, get her a subscription to the journal, right? And put it on her doorstep. It's fascinating because I get copies of the journal and I send them to marketing. I send them to the president. I send them to the vice provost. I socialize my work. And this is something that we have to learn how to do better. We have to learn how to promote ourselves and to account for the labor we do. So it is local, but it is all tied together into our regional presence and our national presence. And I will reiterate, if we want the regions to exist in 10 years, right? Because Keith Kroll's clarion cry in that article is not 100% wrong. If we want the regionals to exist in 10 years, we are going to have to reinvest in building them in interesting and new ways. There is just no doubt about that. 40 people, in a hotel, on the 6th floor of a hotel in Oklahoma City does not a profession make. But if we had 2 people from each community college in our region, what would that look like? And how powerful would that be? I think very. So thank you again for the invitation and the time to talk and all of that. I never quite know. I've been running around the country, I think, since like 2015, giving versions of this talk, either complaining about how universities don't prepare graduate students or how there's work that we need to do. And I think that that's true. And so I'm very grateful to have the space and the time to do that today. Thank you.